presentation is titled Youth Engagement Foundations, and our speakers are Stephanie Sikes-Jones. She is the TAYLRD Youth Leadership Coordinator at the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. We also have Jasmine Boatwright and Joshua Calarino with Youth Move National with us today. So before I turn it over to them, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. If you haven't already, please mute your mics. However, if you have a question during the session or a comment, please feel free to unmute during the session and add to the conversation. Also, as always, this workshop will be recorded and it's going to be posted on the RIAC YouTube channel, and we'll put that link in the chat box later on in the session. You may use the chat box today if you prefer for questions and or comments. Lee and I will be monitoring it during the session. Also, a session evaluation link will be posted in the chat box towards the end of the session, so please just take a moment to complete it. At that time, it's only like 3 or 4 questions. And as always, if you need a certificate of attendance, please let me know. They're available by request. You can email me and I'll get that to you today, and I'll put my email in the chat box as well. So I'm going to go ahead at this time and turn it over to our presenters.
Good morning, everybody. So like Vanessa already said, our presentation is named Youth Engagement Foundations, and Joshua is the creator of this original PowerPoint along with Jasmine. So I'm going to let him talk about that. And we're going to hop into introducing ourselves a bit as well.
Awesome, wonderful. Yes, hello and welcome everyone. A bit of the presentation that you're going to be seeing here today was created for Washington State, and a lot of the youth engagement foundations, as you can imagine, are fundamental kind of universally. So it should be applicable to all the work that you're doing also in Kentucky. With that, I actually would like to have that quick slide change there. And as you can see right in the center, hello everyone, my name is Joshua Calarino. I go by he, him pronouns, and I work as a youth program specialist at Youth Move National. A lot of my experience stems from youth engagement work, youth advocacy, youth programming, things like that. I've done a great deal of work in the youth mental health and substance misuse space. I have done a lot of work both locally and nationally affecting the systems of care. I've presented at many conferences, and a good chunk of my work kind of, I guess we could say, culminated in 2016 when I won the Youth Voice for Leadership Voice Award from SAMHSA. So with that, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to my co-facilitators to introduce themselves.
Hi there, good morning. I'm Jasmine Boatwright. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a youth programs coordinator with Youth Move National. A lot of my experience is in working with young people and leading system of care youth initiatives, as well as community organizing. I was able to be the co-creator of a few youth-led groups here in Wayne County. I'm in Detroit, you guys. So I've been able to also be the director of Youth Move Michigan, which was our statewide youth move group. So thank you all for inviting me, and I'll go ahead and pass it over to Stephanie.
Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Stephanie Sikes-Jones. I am the TAYLRD state level youth leadership coordinator, and I work with the Department for Behavioral Health. I go by pronouns she, her, and my leadership journey started when I was about 18 years old. I joined a youth council for young people who have lived experience in foster care. But I found when I was working in that group, there was not a lot of conversations happening around mental health, but so much of my lived experience was about my mental health. So as I kind of went along, I found some opportunities to join Kentucky Youth Move and eventually started working for TAYLRD. And TAYLRD stands for Transition Age Youth Launching Realized Dreams. It is our Healthy Transitions initiative here in Kentucky. So our group is really about improving services for 16 to 25-year-olds. As we know, that there's a huge gap that happens, that young people often will drop out of services around the age of 16, come back around really 30 years old. So we know that we have to do things in a specialized way. And for us, that really means asking the young people what they want and implementing it. So one big thing that we do is the drop-in centers, but my job in particular is just to improve youth voice access and youth support across the state of Kentucky, so that we're seeing all programs being able to be more youth and family driven. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I think I'm gonna pass it back off to Josh to talk about the rest of the presentation.
Yeah, and speaking of the rest of the presentation, today we're going to be discussing discussing all of these points you see on screen. We're going to start off with some introductions and icebreakers. You just heard ours, but we are going to invite you all into the space, and we'll go over youth engagement foundations proper. We'll roll that into readiness evaluation themes, and we'll cap it off with considerations for recruitment. And of course, at the end, if there are any extra questions, we can hopefully answer them, but feel free, like we mentioned before, to drop them into the chat box or unmute yourselves to ask if you have anything between right now and then. With all of that being said, we're going to roll into that icebreaker. So in the chat box, or unmute yourselves, you can feel free to maybe unmute yourselves, let us know your name, where you're from, things like that, and answer a quick question. What is your favorite thing about partnering with youth and young adults?
I'm Jacqueline Craig. I work with 7 counties in Louisville, and I would say their energy. I'm an old lady now, and I don't have that, and so I feed off of theirs.
Thank you for jumping in and sharing that. And I'm seeing in the chat box youth excitement and passion, learning new things. They have fresh new ideas and even getting their perspective. So if anyone else wants to jump in and add, please feel free. Seeing a few more in the chat box. Teach me about new music and great ideas, energy and hopefulness, and love seeing the potential in their lives. All amazing responses.
So since this call is very much about the youth rep position on the RIAC and in SEAC as well, we just wanted to review some of the language around legislation with you. Those of you all who are in charge of getting youth and youth alternates onto RIAC know this language already. It very much defines who is eligible and the process to get them onto the RIAC. So I'm not going to read through it all, but I think this is this was a big moment in Kentucky's history. This was huge for the youth movement, that it was actually going to be put into statute that young people needed to be a part of the team. It really showed that our state is bought into the idea of being more youth and family driven when we're thinking about the system of care, how we're doing services, how we're talking about programming in the community. This was huge. And this is really great. But this happened in 2014. And since this got put in place, or 2018, right, Vanessa? 2018. And since this got put in place, what we've noticed is, okay, this is a bit more complicated than we thought it was going to be, right? And since 2018, we've had a pandemic. So many things have changed. So yes, we want youth there, but today we really want to highlight the things that we need to consider to not only get young people to the RIAC, but get them really engaged as partners and get them to stay with us and grow in the way that we want them to, and really help our organizations to really do the good work of the youth and family driven movement here in our state. So Jasmine has a poll, and Vanessa or Lee, we could use your help. I think Jasmine does need to be able to share her screen, and I just remembered this as we pull this slide up, but I could not make her a co-host. Would one of you all mind to help us?
Done.
Thank you. Oh, I need someone to stop sharing their screen. Thank you. All righty. So we wanted to do a quick Menti poll with you all. Hopefully you all have done Menti before. Well, someone has answered already. You guys are fast. Hopefully you've had the chance to do Menti before. If you haven't, it's pretty simple. You can go into your web browser, type in www.menti.com, and then type in this code here, which is 5012-1649. And I can also drop that in the chat box if I have this. Oh, it's in there. Thank you, Josh. And so we want to ask the question, how will you rate yourself or your council on recruiting or being able to recruit youth voice? Would you say that you're doing great and leading the way? Would you say things are okay, but could be a little better? Or I see a few people saying, please help. And please, feel free to answer this question. Honestly, there will be no judgment on our end. I think we've all been in each one of these stages at one point. So I'll give you all a few more seconds just to go ahead and get your Menti responses in, and then we'll see what we have. All right. It looks like Kentucky feels like you guys are doing pretty good. You're doing okay, could be a little better. And then it definitely, I see 14% of individuals, or shifting a little bit, but that are saying that, please help, some help could be useful at this moment, which, like I said, completely understand. We have one more question for you before we get back to the PowerPoint. Let's go into that now. If my computer works. Ta-da. The second question is, how would you rate yourself or your council on being able to keep and or retain youth voice? So again, we want you to rate if, I don't know why there's a fourth option there, you guys, please ignore that. But if you're doing great and leading the way, if you feel like things are okay and could be a little better, or if you feel like you're at a stage where you could definitely use some help. And I'll give you all about 1 minute to get your responses in here. Okay, so far it seems like people are doing okay, but definitely there's some folks that could use some help and some support around keeping and retaining youth voice and youth involvement. We definitely hope that this presentation will steer you in the right direction. And if you need more assistance or support, we'll definitely provide some information at the end of this presentation for you guys to keep in contact with us. With that being said, I will stop sharing my screen and release host privileges. Joshua, I'm gonna pass it back to you.
Thanks. And as you can see on screen, there's a definition on there. Youth engagement is a strategy in which youth are given a meaningful voice and role and are authentically involved in working towards changing the systems that directly affect their lives. Now, luckily for us, all the important words in this are bolded, but again, strategy, and I think what's important is meaningful voice and role, and the authentic word that you see on screen. It's not just about giving a voice and giving a role, but it's about these roles actually mattering, having an effect, actually truly making them involved. We don't have it on screen here, and we won't go over it. We had something similar, but to discuss, I'm sure many of us have seen the ladder of youth engagement, and that ladder varies all the way from the low end to manipulation, all the way to the high end of youth having direct involvement. We want to get them on the higher end on that ladder, and to do that, those two things are on there: meaningful voice, authentic engagement, and again, of course, working towards changing the systems. A huge bulk of our work stems around the fact that we are changing the systems to have more positive outcomes. That's kind of the baseline of the work that we are doing here. So getting youth engagement and putting it into the system makes it so that the system is more effective. All right. And we have now, right, youth voice. Research shows that patients and their families who actively engage with their mental health care systems, rather, they have better outcomes. It's just a straight line upwards on that graph. Often choose less expensive options when participating in shared decision making, and express greater satisfaction with their healthcare experience. The Center for Advancing Health report here to stay what healthcare leaders about youth engagement, right? So engagement is active, right? It's not a static thing that's happening. We are constantly working to have active engagement, finding new ways to do that, engaging new different people, pulling in different resources. It is not something that you just do once or twice and then you're finished. The healthcare system doesn't make engagement easy. The system of care that we work in is, frankly, even for the people that work in it, a little difficult to navigate. Even those who are well-versed, have spent decades in it, have degrees around it, oftentimes have difficulty just getting their head around what can be considered just basic concepts in our work. And that next point there, everyone benefits from engagement. Myself, the staff member, and the consumer, the youth in this case, engage with me. All of us do better when engagement is had. Engagement is demanding and many are unprepared. So you can sure engage youth, for example, but there are a lot of things more than just bringing them into the room. There is a basic knowledge base that needs to be had by youth for them to be able to authentically engage, expanding their education around what all the acronyms are, baseline, what all the fancy words are going to be using, what the roles are, the bylaws of your organization, the finances that do and do not dictate what you can do. All of these things are vital to the work that we are doing. The way that I like to think about it is, if you just invite youth into the room and expect them to be able to give you feedback, it's essentially like giving a third grader a book on physics. Like, I mean, if they're really smart, maybe they can get it, but otherwise there's no way it's going to be anything that's going to be helpful. And then the last point on screen here, partnerships are required. Youth, families, consumers that we're discussing, they are partners in this space. There shouldn't be some kind of competition between the two. We're working together to create better outcomes. So when we're working with the youth, we should be engaging them as such, as partnerships, as partners rather, whom we respect, encourage, and assist in the betterment of our work.
All right, so just to speak to some of what Josh is talking about, this is something that we often use along with that Heart's Ladder graphic that Joshua just mentioned. Before we hop into this, I want to say this and Heart's Ladder, I went through a class in early 2020, and I really learned something new. I've been doing this for about 10 years. I'm very familiar with Heart's Ladder and all of the different definitions, like Joshua said, like from manipulation, tokenism, decoration, all the way up to what youth and family driven partnership should really look like. But one thing we don't often talk about is when to use it. We often try to apply these concepts to our entire group, everything we do, our mission and vision. And while that's really great and useful, what we really should be recommending is people are pulling this out at the start of every project. So within RIACs, we have those action plans. When we're looking at how youth and families are engaged in action plans, we really need to be referring to this tool as well as Heart's Ladder to look at the definition and be realistic with ourselves and be kind of okay with where we're actually going to land with this particular project. Of course, you want to aim as high as you can, but it's okay to be realistic, and that helps to really start to apply those concepts in a practical way. So with this this tool, it comes from the spectrum of adult attitudes towards youth, which is a great assessment to take. It lets you kind of know where you're at. And we're not going to go through the assessment today, but what we are going to talk about is what you can learn about yourself through the assessment. So there's typically 3 styles of youth engagement. And as a young person who has come up through the system, I have experienced these in my one-on-one, that individual service level. As a young leader, I've experienced these in like state and regional policy places and national policy spots. And then finally, as a young person who is also an adult ally, sometimes I've had to reflect and experience these through the lens of how am I supporting my young people and what style am I falling into? So the first style is a little scary to say, but it is the belief that young people are objects. And in this style, we often do things to young people. And then in style 2, youth are recipients. So we're doing things for young people. And then in style 3, youth are resources. So we're doing things with young people. So I really like to use this when I'm thinking about the services I received, thinking about when I was going through independent living as a foster youth. If my provider was going to do things to me, they were going to tell me where I was going to live, where I was going to go to college, when and how I was going to make those decisions. Or they might do some things for me, where maybe they're filling out my applications, they're doing the research to figure out where I want to go to school, they're doing the research to help me think about the community I'm going to be moving to, but I'm not involved in that process. When we shift the style to doing things with young people, which is very much what does happen in some of the independent living work, we're doing all that research together. We're talking through the pros and cons. And what that does is enable the young person to feel empowered. That helped me to feel empowered. It helped me learn the skills to think about big decisions in my life and do the research the right way and be brave enough to make phone calls by myself eventually and set up doctor's appointments and all those things. So the with way is really what we want to do, but that's just the individual service level. So this kind of takes a deeper dive into the spectrum of attitudes and talks about what the objectives are. And I just really want to highlight here that while all of the objectives, there is some sort of personal growth for young people. The one thing that we don't often talk about is with style 3, that it's actually good for the organization, and it increases organizational effectiveness immensely when you're able to do things with young people as partners, because you're not only just asking them their opinion, but if you're actually doing things with them, what you're going to see is growth and investment from them, and they're going to pour back into your organization. And it's really going to help increase your outcomes and engagement for other young people, which is a huge deal. So especially as we're talking about moving from, okay, we don't want to just do this within our individual services, but we want to do this in the regional and state policy level. We really want to stick with this style 3, because ultimately it's not just about helping the young people, it is about also helping our organization. So we want to become pros at doing things with young people as partners, supporting them and helping them develop so that they are very, very competent and confident partners in our work. Jasmine and Josh, would you have anything to add to that?
I think you did a great job with explaining that.
Just wanted to make sure. There's tons and tons. We could do a whole presentation just on this tool along with Hart's Ladder, but we didn't want to spend too much time here today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Jasmine.
And hey,
All righty.
Katie, I just wanted to bring attention to one of the comments that's in the chat box because I feel like it's very important. Kathy said, and that all takes time. You can't expect youth to just know it all and jump in feet first. It takes time and help, mentoring services, training to advance their roles, not unlike our parent roles. Thank you, Kathy.
Yes, Kathy, I completely agree. It definitely takes time. I think when I first started in just basic advocacy work, and even as a coordinator, it took the better part of a year to really understand all of the moving pieces of the systems and what the system of care is and the different terms that was being used. So I completely agree with that. Thank you for that. That being said, both Stephanie and Joshua have mentioned that youth engagement looks different at different levels and may change at different points of time. So what we want to do right now is take a deeper dive and really look at the different levels of youth engagement and provide some examples of what youth engagement, peer one-on-one kind of peer-to-peer or national engagement could look like with young people. Can we go to the, thank you. Youth engagement levels. So we see youth and young adults engaged on 6 different levels. That's national, state, community, organizational, peer, and individual. We'll focus a lot more today on community, organizational, and peer, because these are the things that we feel that you guys will probably benefit the most from at this moment, but feel free to let us know if you want information on the rest of them. Just going through the regular levels of youth engagement, at a national level, you usually see young people leading and participating in national efforts, especially different collectives as it relates to youth voice. So that's like national councils, committees, research efforts, advocacy campaigns, you name it. We, at a statewide level, you usually see youth and young adults informing and influencing state councils, committees, different grants, and efforts. Usually at the state level, you also have young people that are really active and in supporting advocacy efforts, whether it's activities, supporting other young people, working with other advocacy groups within their community to kind of help elevate voices. We see that often as well. But when we talk about community engagement, right, that is the awareness and information dissemination, the leading and hosting community events. And some of those community events could be anywhere between like community town halls or listening sessions to just fun activities for young people to engage other young people and families in. Outreach events and participating in community with other alumni and those invested in systems. So when we look at community engagement, it's really around creating opportunities for individuals to come together and start thinking about what works or what doesn't work for their community and begin to figure out ways to get involved to help change some of those things. At an organizational level, when we think about youth engagement, that's young people really leading efforts in the orgs, right? So they're informing quality improvement, whether it's through surveys or discussions with other young people as focus groups or different things like that. They are advising on policies and other internal changes that may affect youth and young adults within the organization. And then there's that one-on-one peer, right? So that transition age youth that Stephanie was talking about a little earlier, the peer councils, committees, the mentoring, the support activities, and just being able to kind of share knowledge and work with those who may be in similar services like foster care, special education, or juvenile justice. And then our final level of youth engagement, of course, is the individual engagement, right? That traditional engagement in services, young people having a say in what's going on with them and what services that they're receiving. Participation in reunification plans or advocating on their own needs and goals and bringing out their own ideas in as solutions to the table. So as we talk about these different levels of youth engagement, we want to provide you all with like some examples of what this could really look like, because it sounds good in theory, but we want to go a little deeper. These are what you are seeing now are identified as YVAL themes, and these are identified requirements for achieving youth-driven practices at most levels, but specifically at an agency level. You'll see things like overall vision and commitment, a collaborative approach, empowered representatives, and we'll go deeper into what those things are. But for the next few slides, what we wanted to do was just provide you guys with some examples of youth leadership initiatives or activities that we've seen in the past that have some of these YVAL things have kind of come up. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. The first example that we have for you is the Connected Initiative. And in this initiative, we see young people. This is a national group that really works on national youth engagement, local and state leadership, youth and youth mentoring and connection, and that youth voice and choice. What we noticed is that in the work that they're doing, some of the themes that have come up is like that overall vision and commitment, meaning there are formal structures and policies in place for youth voice and participation. There are clear roles for participation. There's transparent assessment efforts to promote youth voice and participation. And so within the work that they're doing, you see some of those things come up. As well as within this work, young people are engaged as empowered representatives. And that is where young people are supported in a way that kind of maximize the potential to have an impact in decisions. So there are multiple young people participating consistently over time. Young people are supported and prepared for meetings and things that are happening. And then there begins to become like a pipeline of opportunities to continue to develop, to continue for young people to develop those leadership skills. So those are the things that you kind of see in this one. You also see young people leading initiatives and projects and participating in evaluation. And one thing that I wanted to say about participating in evaluation is that young people are engaged in efforts to determine how well the agency is doing. Not just evaluation within youth programming, but overall. Systematic efforts to gather feedback on services. Young people help decide how efforts will be assessed, and young people are informed about findings of evaluation and CQI efforts, right? So as much as they are supporting the collecting of data and satisfaction surveys, young people are also informed on what came from those data satisfaction surveys and CQI methods. Am I missing anything, guys? All right, hearing none, let's move ahead to the next one. The second example that we have for you guys came out of Maine's Mental Health Court. And this is more of a statewide kind of initiative that does a lot of youth-led restorative justice work. They have a diversion program for youth facing criminal charges and school disciplinary actions. They also have youth volunteers who serves as advocates and facilitators throughout the restorative justice process. So in here, we see YVAL themes come up like a collaborative approach, empowered representatives again, and commitment to facilitation and facilitation of support. And when we talk about a collaborative approach, we are talking about young people who are treated and valued as partners in the decision-making process, much like Joshua mentioned earlier, making sure that young people are not just at the table to be at the table, but they actually are treated as equal partners in the decision-making process. And then there's there's equitable ways to support young people in being there as well. So young people are either stipend or there's some type of incentive for their participation. In a collaborative approach, you also see the respect and willingness to have mutual learning and compromise. You begin to see youth-friendly meetings and information being shared in a transparent way that will, this will kind of support what's happening when it comes to decision-making and things like that. Next slide, please. Well, with this slide, I'm gonna go ahead and slide this back over to Joshua to give us a little overview of examples for the community, as Joshua was a part of this video that we're going to show.
Give me a moment. I'm going to have to figure out what's going on with my sound.
No worries. I feel like Joshua stepped away for a second. So this is oh, Joshua's back. Hi, Josh. I'll let you go ahead and intro.
Got it. So hello, everyone. Hi. So as Jasmine mentioned, right, I was a part of this process, and I can give you more context after the video, but the Therapist Be Like video is a really good example of a way to engage youth in something, do so organically, and have it have an effect as well. The Therapist Be Like video came out essentially because we were having a general meeting at Youth Move Miami, and every single general meeting that we had a check-in. Highlight, low light, something good that happened this week, something bad that happened this week, one or the other or both, whatever you want to do. And the youth raised their hand and they said, hey, I saw my therapist earlier this week and I had this really bad experience, right? That was just shared. Normal stuff. Happens sometimes. Then another youth raised their hand and they said, you know what? I've also had this experience. And then another youth and another youth and another youth and another youth. And it seemed like this was less an isolated incident experience and more like our entire community of youth are having these wild experiences with therapists that are really bad. So what happens is you bring this up with the team, things like that. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be garnering anyone's attention within the system of care. Everybody just seems to be like, yeah, it's just whatever happens. So we decide, okay, youth, our group here, what do you want to do about this? What can we do? And they say, well, what we would like to do is we would like to make a video. Youth at the time, we were big on our multimedia, on our social media, things like that. And the youth wanted to make a video about this. So we said, all right, cool. We got the youth all together. We said, what kind of video do you want to make? How long do you want it to be? Is it going to be comedic? Is it going to be funny? What's it going to be? They wrote the script. They acted it out. They did all the stuff that you could possibly want to do. It was an entirely youth-driven process. Then what we went ahead and did with that video is that we went to program and evaluation subcommittee meetings for the local system of care grant that many of the youth were participating in. And we presented this video to that entire group. And to speak, honestly, it ruffled a lot of feathers. Many of the therapists and caseworkers and things like that were really upset to have watched a video that was essentially saying that they maybe weren't doing as amazing of a job as they could have been. But there was nothing that they could really do because, like I mentioned, it was an entirely youth-driven process. It was essentially direct feedback from the youth about the services that they were receiving. So they could try and say whatever they wanted to say, but the youth are going to do what, what the youth feel, or they're going to share how they feel. And we had some more suggestions after that, but we're going to go ahead and pause here, and I'm going to allow you to play the video.
Just count to 10.
I've tried that, it doesn't work.
You can talk about it.
I've tried talking about it.
Just count to 10. How does it make you feel?
How does that make you feel?
How does that make you feel?
Why are you so angry?
I'm not.
I don't like your attitude.
What you mean?
There it is.
Why do you talk like that?
Why are you dressing like that?
Why does your face look like that?
Why do you have this rude girl mentality?
Good morning. Are you sad? Okay, look at these cats. They'll make you happy.
I don't care.
Cats. Don't you like cats?
No.
Cats. How do you feel about these cats? Aren't they warm and fuzzy? Don't you love cats?
Yeah.
Cat, 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 meow.
Pretty. They're gorgeous.
Your mom told me that you stole her earrings.
No, I didn't. She misplaced them.
You know, it's okay to tell me the truth.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How you feeling today?
I feel kind of sad.
Whoa, it's sad? That's not normal. You know what? Nothing to worry about. I'm gonna prescribe you 600 milligrams of antidepressants.
Isn't that a bit much? Okay.
You need a moment?
Yes.
Well, that's new. Where'd you get it?
How are you?
I'm fine.
So you ready to begin?
Yeah.
I have this method that I would like to try with you. Look at these cats and tell me how do you feel.
Well, I'm not on anyone's side. I just want to know what happened.
Oh, well, I'm here to help. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, yeah, you can see the through line that happened there. You were receiving these kinds of services and they wanted these kinds of services instead. And the whole thing was supposed to have a comedic tone. So like I mentioned, presented that video, and while it did ruffle some feathers, what it also did was get the attention of the evaluation team, who then dug deep into the numbers and found that the anecdotal evidence that they were hearing from this video lined up with the numbers that they were getting within their system of care with the Ansel Casey and the measurement tools that they were using. So what they had actually done is launch a series of focus groups where they brought myself in to lead, to actually take in-depth notes about what exactly it was the youth were experiences from all facets, from the peer services that we received, the clinical services, and then from the in-house services that we had at all of the different organizations. And through that, they had actually made changes to the grant itself to help youth have a better time with the exiting program, the entry program, and everything in between. They actually made changes that made the grant itself overall more effective by the end of it. And it had actually been so successful that this particular social media thing that you see in front of you, right, their hashtag therapist be like movement, caught enough traction and got enough attention that it actually won SAMHSA's Echo Award in the gold standard, the highest category that you can get, for internal constituents, for essentially affecting changes within the local system of care. So that is to say, again, to reiterate what we said at the top, right, youth engagement is a strategy, and how and when you implement that strategy provides better outcomes to your systems, whatever you embed. Being able to give authentic engagement, i.e. giving youth a voice, opening up on the weekends and providing food so that they are able to make it and authentically engage in script writing, editing, camera working, acting, right? All of those things embedded to make a wildly successful project that helped affect the local system of care and even get big enough to get awarded nationally as well. So again, it can sometimes be about just meeting the youth where they are and asking the simple question of, what would you like to do? How can I help you with this? What would be the most creative solution for this? And gauging that against what you can do. Coming at it from a perspective of not, this is what we can do, but just say whatever you want to do, and we'll do our very best to make it possible, can really allow youth to make big changes like what you just heard with the therapist be like movement. So I know we've said a lot of words, and just before we move on to the next slide, I did want to leave a tiny bit of space here in case we did have any questions. Okay, seems like that's not the case, so we can move on to the next slide. Now we'll
All
go
right,
ahead
thank you for that, Joshua. And I just want to mention that in the Therapist Be Like videos, what you saw, the YVAL things that you saw pop up there was young people leading initiatives and projects, and young people showing up as empowered representatives. So when we talk about leading initiatives and projects, those are exactly what Joshua just said. The agency was able to support young people in taking the lead in designing something tangible that supports initiatives that's initiated by young people. That was a lot, but hopefully you guys get what I'm saying here. Moving on to the next slide here, we have an example from Connect Ohio, which is one of our sites for the quick, which focuses on work with LGBTQ young people. And what you see here is at an organizational level, young people really being hired in as consultants, youth advisory groups being developed. You see that they did a self-assessment process. And one of the things that I forgot to mention with the YVAL is a youth voice at agency level assessment that really helps identify the different levels of youth engagement within the agency, and then identify some different strategies on that you may be able to take in order to get to your desired level of youth engagement. And so you see that they took a self-assessment or created a self-assessment process. And then there were they focused on having youth-to-youth opportunities based on young people's interests. So that could be around training, advising, outreach. And then here at the bottom of the slide, you see the YVAL themes that came up again, right? So that's collaborative approach, empowered representatives, participation and evaluation. And here's a new one that showed up for you guys, which is workforce and development. This is where the agency ensures that all staff are able to interact collaboratively with young people. Young people are actively participating in the hiring process, and staff are trained about agency policies and the commitment to youth participation. Performance evaluations for jobs, including attention to staff competencies related to participation are happening, as well as the agency develop more peer roles. Oftentimes when we're doing youth engagement and youth involvement, we, of course, like anything, we want to start small, right? So we may start with a couple of young people participating on a board, or we may have one youth advisory board, but we want to make sure that as an agency, we're continuously thinking about opportunities outside of the ones that we already have developed that may be able to help develop that young person's skills or competence or confidence with being engaged in this type of work. Next slide, please. So what helps, what harms? Multiple levels. So we are going to actually, what helps, what harms is something that is developed to amplify the voices of youth and young adults. It's a facilitated discussion framework for gathering feedback that from youth who have some types of system experience. This is something that is usually youth-led, and the purpose is to really identify the gaps and needs in local communities, and provide feedback that informs the program or policy to kind of change. We've seen a little bit of an example like of this, of the finished product of this when we looked at the Therapist Be Like video, right? So definitely there was some facilitated youth-led discussion around the young people's experiences, where young people were able to identify some real needs and some gaps that they were able to see and provide some feedback. And again, the YVAL themes that show up on this slide is leading initiatives, empowered representatives, participation and evaluation, and workforce development. I will go ahead and pause for a second for any questions that may come up.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to add, if that's okay, Jasmine.
Oh, please do.
Okay, so all of those themes in the multicolored boxes down at the bottom, like Jasmine had said at the beginning, come from the YVAL. And those are proven things that we need in place, right, to have effective youth engagement. So there is something called the YVOC, which stands for Youth Voice on Committees evaluation, that you all as RIACs can participate in by contacting Youth Move National. I hope I'm not jumping ahead, Jasmine. I don't remember if you were going to mention that, but that would help you get a good handle on how your group is doing with all of these little multicolored boxes, right? It's enough to ask young people to come to the table, but when it really comes down to keeping them there, these things really, really need to be in place. And we all struggle with that. That's why jobs like mine, Joshua's, and Jasmine's exist, is because this takes a while to build up. So definitely wanted to shout out the YVOC through Youth Move National as a tool that could be used, and really tying it back to these things need to be in place to keep young people engaged and keep them coming back.
Thank you so much for that, Stephanie. In my rambling, I completely forgot to mention that, so thank you. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Joshua to lead us through our activities.
All righty, team. What we're going to go ahead and do right now is, as you can see, we're going to have a discussion. This will be a large group discussion. Please feel free. I also see something in the chat as well, a couple things in the chat, but what I'm going to go ahead and do is explain. We're going to have a large group discussion here. So you could feel free to unmute for some of these questions, but we're looking to get a lot of feedback from everyone. So you can drop it into the chat box to answer these questions. We'll start with question 1 and then move on from there. So for question 1, what limitations may exist at the regional level for youth engagement, right? Within your region, within your local area, what limitations might exist for youth engagement? And you can feel free to unmute and answer and drop some answers into the chat box.
I think a limitation on one of the RIACs I serve for the youth engagement is primarily just the youth being undereducated in how important their role is. And I don't know that we, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but trying harder to show the youth that, you know, they are just as important, if not more, because they're the next generation, you know, sitting on these councils, sitting on the RIACs, and just letting them know how valuable they are.
And Joshua, some of the stuff that's coming up in the chat box too. And thank you, Amber. That is a big one, I think. It took me a while to understand why youth voice was so important. and why it was important that people like myself and other young people were speaking up. And not only that, but like the just diversity in that it can't just be one or two of us, that there has to be many of us. It's got to be a collective voice. But lots of conversation about lack of resource and opportunities, transportation, loss of contact with youth as they age out of our systems. Absolutely, that's a huge one, especially when you're thinking about RIACs. They meet during the day. So, you know, if you're under 18, you're likely in high school. So that can be challenging.
I also got one privately saying that finding a youth that is willing to say without feeling like they are not heard is a present limitation. And I see also not being paid for their time. Something that I think is really important, and we actually have an entire document called in our Things to Consider series about this topic, is that, right, youth are providing value to your system, and being able to provide a stipend, honorarium, and things like that can be really important. And it pulls me to another point about not only paid for their time, but also feel like the meetings themselves have to be of value for youth. If they're really disengaging, really make you feel bad after you go into a meeting, like why would you ever go back? So stipends are really good, but your actual meeting itself should also be a place that is culturally responsive, effective, and has its own inherent value as well. And I see also that they have not been given opportunities in the past, so something new is foreign, and they might be apprehensive at first to engage and share, which ties into that idea of making something, right, culturally responsive, welcoming, open, and also providing a teaching space and a learning space for the youth to be in as well. With that, we do have a few more questions, so I do want to move us over to question 2 there, which is what limitations might exist in your city or community for youth engagement. All right, so we're all at the entire region, but for now, your exact little city or community, what do you think might be coming up? I'm seeing, yeah, oh, lack of opportunities and ageism, yeah. Lack of transportation is a huge one. Transportation again. No existing positions at all for youth, lack of access. Complete buy-in and acceptance of youth voice from establishments is always a difficult prospect, right? The idea of having youth be equal partners is something that is very foreign to a lot of people, kind of tying back into the ageism. Yeah, funding, another massive one.
I want to speak to that. Michelle put criteria for them to be, quote, appropriate to share. And that is a huge one too, because we expect young people to carry themselves in a very particular way, to be a part of these groups and to, you know, be willing to hear their feedback. But there's 2 problems with that. The first is we do want authentic voice. And sometimes authenticity means it's going to come out a little harsh because there's a lot of experience behind that authenticity. So you want to hear the right way to say it, or you want to hear young people and what they have to say, but you want them to know automatically the right way to say it to make sure people hear them. That takes lots of training. Kate Tilton, who's on this call, happens to be the project director for TAYLRD, but she used to be my supervisor and was a great supervisor and spent a lot of time with me, and still to this day has calls with me of like, yeah, that could be sticky. Let's have time to talk about the right way to say that in an email or in a meeting or something like that. And not all young people have that person in their life. So I wanted to put that out there. But the other problem with that too is we call it being professionalized or co-opted is another way that this can play out when it comes to things being appropriate. Is as we teach these young people how to be more palatable in appropriate spaces, they can often start to lose touch of their lived experience, and not really start to represent that collective voice. So it's really important to be aware of that it's a delicate balance when we're helping young people learn how to share their lived experience authentically, but in a way that can be heard by the partners around the table. I'll shut up now, Josh, sorry.
You're totally good. Thank you for jumping in and sharing and just kind of, sharing your thoughts. Again, keep all of these things in mind. We're going to roll through to the third question now. But again, keep all your thoughts you have in here. What limitations may exist within your council for youth engagement? I see a great one, meeting time. Yeah. Not enough youth versus the adults ratio. Yeah, the schedule. Something that we talk about all the time at Youth Movement National is, if you're having a meeting at 12 o'clock noon every third Wednesday of the month, like that's like most youth are like in school during that time, or they're in their college classes, or they're at work at that exact time. So scheduling times is really difficult to manage, and sometimes you have to open a little later, like with the example that I shared with the therapist RIAC video. When we were doing all of that work, we opened up on those days to do it on Saturdays for a few weeks to be sure that the youth were able to make it, and we even provided food for them as well. I see, add that addition there, Stephanie. Yeah, not every partner is committed to hearing directly from youth and partnering. Exactly. Yeah, and still just giving youth that token voice. It's a very, very dangerous thing to play. And what happens is you fall into the trap of, I think I'm doing a good job, but again, that's not authentic and meaningful engagement, like we mentioned in that youth engagement strategy definition. So what happens is you're actually losing more than you're gaining from that process. You're losing the respect, patience, and time of the youth themselves, and then of course your organization is not prospering from any feedback that they're getting because they are tokenized. So yeah, it's two-pronged, quadruple-edged sword when you do it that way. Right. Leave some space here for some final thoughts. But again, I'm adding, so when you're thinking about this, right, you're thinking about your entire region, like all of Kentucky, right, but down to like your local city, then brought down even deeper to within your organization, that council. We've gone over a lot of the limitations that exist. Now, limitations are always difficult to manage and to work with, but of course, there's something that you can try and overcome. And I do see an added thing there, right? Being transparent, helping them understand that change doesn't happen right away. Government takes time to make changes. And yes, I think I can drop that into the idea of communication. Communication can sometimes be a limitation. If you're not providing enough of it, it causes lots of issue. It should be a two-way street. There should be someone to tell the youth why what's going on, this is what's happening, this is why we can't do this is why we can't do this, etc., etc. But again, what I'm going to do is actually ask to have the next slide put up, and we're going to continue a larger discussion. And we're thinking about, again, with this project that we have in mind of, these are our limitations. These are all limitations from all the way from the 1,000-foot level, all the way to the local agency level, to the council level. Think about this. What are the actions you can begin or stop to increase youth engagement work within the next 6 months, right? So based on the limitations you just gave, right, what can we do to mitigate those things? And of course, I'm loving the discussion that I'm seeing in the chat. It's still continuing off those last questions, right? Schedule is the biggest issue for sure. But again, now can we flip the switch here and think about some wins we can have?
I have a question.
Absolutely.
with these questions and barriers, trying to get more youth involved, because I do think it's extremely important. Is there anything in the works with schools or high schools to where these teens, these youth can participate in these meetings during the day and get credit? Because they are most likely during work hours.
Yeah.
That's a Vanessa question. Sorry to put you on the spot, Vanessa. I think I know the answer, but I don't want to misspeak.
Well, and you're fine. And I'm taking lots of notes here as things that we need to take back and be able to speak to our partners about. That's not something necessarily that we can make a call on at the Department for Behavioral Health, but within our individual RIACs, working with those partners across, our communities and on our councils to see how we can make that happen, even if it's a pilot in some areas, and being able to show how effective it was, or if there's things that we need to tweak as we move forward. Does that help to answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, I really love that idea of pushing it further. Right now, they can get a school excuse or a work excuse, but I love your thinking, Amber, in like pushing it further. So maybe that's an action that we can look at taking. And I love Vanessa's idea of piloting, because these big changes, sometimes we get in our heads that like, how can we do this across the whole state? So one thing I've learned through my work at the state is sometimes pilots are the best way to kick it off. So thank you so much for that, Vanessa.
Yes, I love the ingenuity in there, right? How can we take it a step further, provide more benefit? Because even if we do get that excuse, like the youth also has to miss class and like miss that lesson. So can we get credit to make up for that? Do we have any other easy wins that come to mind for the next 6 months? Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I see it in the chat box. Yeah. Partner with community centers that hold after school programs, making sure that youth are met their own comfort ground. Yeah. Something that is very limiting oftentimes is the fact that, meeting in person, you've already said it, transportation is really hard. So if we work with organizations that only allow us to meet the youth in person, it's like, all right, well, cool. But how is you supposed to get here? The bus? Even in a big city that I live in, like Miami, Florida, like taking the bus, I still, it takes me like 2 hours to get places depending on where I'm going. I see. Yeah.
To speak to that, Josh. Oh, I was going to say, even here in Kentucky, like we have two, we have bus systems across our state, but two of our largest cities, Lexington and Louisville, that's a huge barrier too. Like even if you have public transportation access, it's hours of time. So we're not just thinking about young people having to take off just for the 1 hour or 2 hour meeting. It's everything around that.
Yeah. Thanks for jumping in. Yeah, that of course ties in with like stipending and all of that, but also the value of the meeting itself. Yeah, I think another easy win there is right, building up a youth council and using them to advise. Youth advisory councils are really, really important, or rather maybe not necessarily really important, but can be incredibly effective in the work that we're doing, providing a really easy way to get feedback from a group of experienced youth and provide those leadership opportunities to increase their capacity. It's a really good way to go about it. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about that here. So now we're going to think again in this large group, but think about your team, right? Ask your team, what does your ideal youth engagement strategy look like? Who is involved? What are they doing? How are they doing it, right? We're aiming for the ideal and we can work on reality from there. So when you're thinking about it within your own teams and your own organizations, what comes to mind? Again, including all those barriers and the 6-month plan, putting this all together. Yeah, I see Stephanie adding. of the RIAC to use these dream questions to propose a youth engagement strategy as part of their action plan. And something that I want to ask or mention right now is that something that happens often is when you're in the work, it's always difficult to see, right? When you're in the weeds and you're doing all of it, it's difficult to kind of be able to think about things like this. These are fairly simple questions, and this is not supposed to be a ding against everyone's intelligence, but it's like, if you're a quarterback on the field, you don't have the overhead view like everyone else does. So what might seem really simple to just throw it there is not actually that simple, because you're seeing everything else. So being able to take a step back, it's sometimes about asking the right questions, and that's what we're trying to do here. Even if you can't come up with an answer now, you can take these things that we're thinking about and implement them in your daily work and come up with these answers and come up with these solutions. So, like Stephanie says, is that reasonable? Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, sorry.
No, go ahead. Either one.
I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Stephanie was saying. I think, at least for me, being new to the RIAC, finding a way to share with the youth why, like, what incentive they have with being involved in part of our group. We as the adult members can see the benefits to it, but if there's no incentive to them to be engaged and involved, why would they want to spend this extra time outside of other responsibilities that they have to be a part of the team? So just trying to find a way to get that word out as to why it's important, why they want to be a part of it, make it exciting for everybody involved.
Thank you for jumping in with that. And also thank you for dropping that school excuse letter in the chat box. Kathy, I saw you have your little hand raised. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think it should be everybody around the table, starting with the LRC, going to us parent reps. The insurance companies could offer all kinds of incentives. So it should be a community. We want it to be a community, but we're all sitting around that table as a community. Why wouldn't it start with us?
Sounds like an amazing question to me. I think Vanessa's taking notes.
Yeah, and to build, oh, go on, Vanessa.
No, I was just gonna say, absolutely, I'm taking notes to be able to share this with everybody, because there's so many good ideas. And, you know, I can tell you just off the top of my head, as I attend RIACs across the state, what I would really like to see, I know we have a RIAC like orientation that we have for all of our members, but I would really like to see, this is my pipe dream right now, but all youth and or parents that come on to RIAC attend, you know, their very own orientation to make sure before they really get I don't know, engaged, or as they get engaged on the councils, that they have that foundational understanding of the importance of why they're there, you know, what it is that we are looking to them for, what a big role they play.
Absolutely. And to go back to what Kathy was saying too, like, I love the idea of, if you were to take this and have a conversation about how do we build a youth engagement strategy in our action plan as RIAC, asking each partner to contribute to what can they add to the incentive. It really increases their buy-in. It kind of shows that everybody in the table has skin in the game, so to speak. So what better way to start really asking people to be part of this youth engagement strategy, instead of leaving it on the backs of the LRCs and the chairs, that everybody has a piece of this, right? What can you add to the incentives for young people and families to be involved is a huge question. I love that, Kathy.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in. I do have some thoughts, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move us forward just a little bit, and I can tack it on at the end if we get there. Oh, wait, not the slide, just the last question. Yeah, so with all of this in mind, what is a major youth engagement goal you might set with your team? And when we're thinking about this, what is a goal you want to meet over the next 3 to 5 years of time? So we have that little short-term window, next 6 months, the dream, probably like a year, 2 years, 3 years, but now way long-term, 3 to 5, what comes to mind?
To speak to Courtney's conversation about turnover, the youth position has high turnover typically. It's kind of rare to see a young person stay through their entire term. So I think 3 to 5 years would be having youth and youth alternates that stay their whole term and build up the next generation of young people so those positions stay filled. And that may seem like a basic goal, but that is my 3 to 5 year hope.
Got it. An awesome response there. And of course, again, this is all with the thinking that, I mean, we have what, 1.5 hours together in this meeting, all that. But again, when you're in the work, when you're doing it on a day-to-day basis, think about these questions and think about the solutions you can come up with them and develop those plans. It doesn't just end here in this space. Take these with you as you go along. So with that, again, just to be sure we have enough time to get through everything comfortably, I'm going to go ahead and move us along, but I'm loving the discussion in the chat box. Hope everybody's getting notes from that. And I think with that, we're going to be getting started with Stephanie.
Yes. And you'll just give there we go, the light. I was a ghost for a second. I love seeing myself super pale on a recording. So we're going to talk about some things about to get started. So this is really the recruitment piece. Everything we talked about before is retention, which is really, really what you need to have in place before you bring young people to your council, so that you can ensure that you're doing everything you can to make it a friendly environment for them to desire to stick around, stay around, and really, really engage. So when we're thinking about getting started, there's lots of things to consider. I'm going to share a few resources or just a few examples of things that we have, and Vanessa is going to email all of them. She's already got all the documents. She's going to email them all out to you with this PowerPoint after our presentation today. So you'll have them to look at, some of them you'll have to use. So first of all, like we've really talked about throughout this presentation, you're going to want to assess your organizational readiness. So with the RIACs, that really means like you need to look at these things, think about how it applies to your RIAC and the region that you're serving. Think about what is going to really help young people even to want to come, right? So that's kind of step one. So you want to look at the stipends. I know there's budgets already in place about how much money they get for attending meetings, travel, all of that. If there's a chance in your community that that amount might be too low to be competitive, you may want to have discussions around how can you all buffer that? What can you add to it? And who, like I think it was Kathy said earlier or somebody else, can add to that from your RIAC? Who has skin in the game and has resources to add to that, to really make this appealing? Just the money, just to be there. Is it really worth me to take off school or work to be there right now? But also looking at how many paid opportunities for involvement are there. There's also that professional development budget. And oftentimes those don't get used because you are like, okay, how do we use that? The professional development opportunities that are in this community, there's not very many that are youth friendly, things like that. The great thing that has happened from the pandemic, a lot of these state level opportunities that are there for young people to engage in, that you can pay them to attend, are now virtual. So there are more opportunities, but it's about getting connected and understanding where to go to look for those opportunities. This is where I'm going to shout out Kentucky SPIN and Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children. Their website is full of opportunities like this. So we encourage you to really look at how often are you giving them those opportunities to stay connected and get more money. I know that's a sticky thing. A lot of people do feel like, well, we don't want the young people to be in it just for the money, but especially in today's youth culture, I know you all are aware that we really do value our time as young people. And even in our work lives, we're asking for us to be reimbursed for our time and our skill level at an appropriate level. So this is completely a cultural shift We've talked about it for a while, but this demand for this type of investment is going to just increase. Whether we like it or not, there's two sides of every issue. It just is the way youth culture is moving. So it's important to just be thinking about that and try to depersonalize it and not think about the pros and cons of that. That is just a matter of fact. It's where we're going. Identify a coaching structure. We've talked a lot in the past in these youth engagement trainings about what coaching or mentoring looks like. But when we're talking about coaching here, we're really talking about that place, like Joshua's mentioned and Jasmine's mentioned, and I've mentioned, to be able to learn and grow my skills and ask questions. Often this lands on like one person. And while it's good, like we've asked for the RIACs to identify a support person, it's good for that to be the main point of contact. This is up to multiple people on the team. That's the way it's sustainable. For instance, the way it works in TAYLRD, I've got Kate Tilton, the project director. I've got Janice Johnston, who is the principal investigator, which means she just wrote the grant, but she's there to help me learn things. I've got Jesse Dillo, the other youth coordinator. He's there to help me learn things. I'm there to help him learn things. We all work together. There's multiple people, and my supervisor, Beth Jordan, Vanessa and Lee, they help me learn things all the time and probably get frustrated when I don't remember them. I just have a team of people that I can go to, and that's taken time to build up, but that's what we want to see within the RIACs. Ensuring all staff members have been trained on partnering with youth and young adults. So this is one we've mentioned kind of earlier in our discussion, that not everybody around the table is practiced, is familiar with, knows how to engage well with young people. So we have youth engagement trainings available. There's this one, there are specialized ones. TAYLRD offers some, and you can contact myself or Kate Tilton or Jesse Dillo or Janice about that if you want it, and I'll make sure our emails are all there. The training is really good, but what I wanted to add to this also is that the accountability piece does need to be in place. And accountability can sound like a really scary word, but what that means is that you have enough champions around the table that when somebody is coming on and they are not practicing good youth engagement, that you all as champions can look at that and say, hey, I have a response for in the moment. It may in the moment in a meeting look like asking a curious question or saying something like, hey, can we talk about this one-on-one afterwards? And just referring back to the agenda and changing topics. It could look like a million things depending on what exactly is going on. But we did want to say that it is good to have youth engagement, but also you want to have a good structure for how you all hold people to that youth engagement, good practice. Doing a cross-agency scan to identify youth and families to participate within a council meeting. We've talked about this a lot as well at the state level about encouraging it not to land on the shoulders of just a couple of people to recruit youth. There's tons of different agencies that serve youth and families on the committees. So it's really taking that time in the agenda to say, hey, we've got a spot open for a youth rep or youth alternate. We really want to get this filled. So I would like at least one person from every agency. Can you all think of somebody? And oftentimes the response is, we don't know of anybody. And I always encourage people, don't focus on readiness totally. Think of what we're working on as a RIAC and think of the young people that you're working with. Would anybody be interested in getting on board? We'll worry about their readiness and help them learn as they go. And connecting them with that support person and everything else, but just to have that conversation and really increase the skin in the game from the partners around the table, that may be what it takes. The other big one is agreeing on the use of trauma-informed, person-centered, and judgment-free language. This includes the next bullet with acronyms and jargon. We do a pretty good job of that. For the most part, about making sure that if there's jargon being used or acronyms, we'll define those. There's lists out there that have all of the acronyms spelled out. And if there's a new one, there's people around the committee that will definitely put it in there. But we often don't talk about things that we usually are used to talking about within our agencies. It can be so easy for us to slip into break room or coffee room talk about some of the cases that we're going through, or, you know, some of the things that we're seeing in our community and in our day-to-day work. And forget that not everybody around the table is used to hearing that kind of language. And sometimes that language can be very judgmental or can feel very judgmental. And as easy as it is for us to say, well, we've had to get over our feelings as, you know, people who are hired as professionals working in this field, you're really talking about young people and families with lived experience. So being trauma informed, person-centered, and judgment-free with your language in these meetings is extremely important. And then also having that way to monitor that as the meetings are going forth. If somebody's not familiar or slips up, we're human, it happens, but having a place to really put that into practice is really important. And I've already talked about what accountability can look like, but it's definitely something to think about. So I wanted to put it here and offer our support to you all in figuring out what that needs to look like. Then the next thing you want to do is really think about, now you know where your organization's at readiness wise, what can you do to improve the youth engagement process? You can draft a partnership description. This may look like a job description, but uses different language. We've got one. It's called the Guidelines for the RIAC, LIAC, and SIAC Youth Parent Reps. And I'll share that here in a moment, but that's kind of out there already. But if you want to adapt your own, you just want to include all that stuff on it, make it look different, work with your young people to make it look a little bit different. I believe that you can do that. You want to really think about those community partnerships. So not only people who are coming to the RIACs, but also the organizations in the area that are serving youth. And that will help you to identify and engage youth participants. One big thing, I know there's a state level effort to really build up those regional youth councils in each of the regions. That would be a really good partner to have, even if somebody's not able to attend every RIAC. That is a space where young people are already, that are passionate about this type of work and that want to be bought in. You want to build those relationships and rapport directly with youth. For those of you who are going to be at the RIAC Leader Peer Group meeting next week, we're going to be talking about some ideas with this, but having small, fun, easy type of events for them to engage in regularly, not just one time a year, but multiple times a year, is a really great way to start recruiting youth. That you're just doing something fun, something low key, something not so serious, that allows them to come in and really engage, get interested. Also, when you are working one-on-one with young people, if you're their support person or you're in a leader position, being able to talk to them. So with like the SIAC youth rep, one thing me and Lee have been doing is, when we start off our relationship, we do some icebreaker questions. We have a list of 15, we popcorn around, we decide which ones we're going to ask each other, and we get to know each other. We have these profiles that we have put together that talks about our favorite food and our music and the podcasts that we like. And it's just a really good opportunity for them to get to know us. And it really increases that partnership vibe, because it shows that you can talk to us about more than just business. And that we are human beings, and we're cool human beings sometimes. I don't think I'm always the coolest, but I own it. But we're cool human beings outside of just these meetings. So we want to partner with you, and we want you to know this stuff about us, and we want to know it about you as well. Make an effort to understand and value youth as individuals. I think that speaks back to like what appropriateness looks like within meetings. But just understanding they're coming from their own individual background experience. This speaks to being culturally responsive. Provide information to youth regularly in a timely manner via text or social media messages, not just in emails. We get very practiced in like sending our agenda out via email. Some young people may even want it in print. So as the support people for these young people, we really need to be mindful about how we're preparing them for these meetings. Provide support during in-person and virtual events. So there is a guidance document, and because of time, I'll make sure you all get that in email, but you've seen it before, that talks about what you should be doing during meetings. It may look like being able to text your young person during a meeting to make sure they're doing okay, having things in place to make sure that they have a plan to step away. You want to engage multiple youth over time to provide diverse perspectives. So that speaks again to engaging with larger groups of youth outside of the RIAC. I understand there's only 2 paid positions on the RIAC, but how are you including those young people? In Jefferson County, you all do a great job of this. I know you're involved with your transition age youth advisory council with TAYLRD, I think is what it stands for, or through our TAYLRD program, and many young people come to that meeting. So that's a great engagement strategy, because if you ever have turnover, you have a large group of young people who are already kind of familiar with RIAC, who are willing to step up and apply. You want to gather feedback from youth to inform future partnerships. So we do this within debriefs after every meeting or in between meetings. We talk about how it's going. What can we do to make it a little bit easier next time? And it can be a little burdensome when there's a lot of changes that need to happen to make it more friendly. But if we do the work now, it makes it easier over time for other youth to engage. And then engage those seasoned youth partners and mentors and peer leaders. So if you have youth peer support specialists, youth coordinators, any of us, Kentucky Youth Move is a great one too. There is a network of young people who have been doing this work for a while, and we are all about building up other young people. So make sure that your RIAC youth rep and youth alternate are connected with us so that we can help mentor them a little bit and help them work through anything that's going on. So I'm going to share these materials via email instead of stopping and sharing my screen again. But to speak to that last bullet, there is a flyer out there with mine and Days Cooper. He works for System Care 5. We are committed to being supports to the RIAC around youth rep and youth alternate engagement. So you definitely can reach out to us. I'm going to share the guidance document, which is the engagement agreement that outlines everything that is required, and then all of the optional stuff for young people and families to get involved when they agree to be a rep. And then the flyer about your position, I'm going to also share. It shows some pictures. It has good information about frequently asked questions. It has the basics. It's colorful. It's engaging. So I wanted to make sure you all had an example of what that could look like, because you all have the creative freedom to work with young people to create those yourself. And Kate, thank you so much. She's sharing some stuff in the chat box. Okay, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let us close out. Jasmine and Joshua, do you want to talk about what's on the slide?
Sure do. Hi. Hello, everyone. So you can feel free to add us next time. So there's a couple of things that you'll see on screen. One, if you have any just general questions about Youth Move, work we do, stuff you want to know, you can email us at info@youthmovenational.org. That goes for anyone at our staff team. If you want to email myself or Jasmine, it's literally just our first names, or Joshua or Jasmine, at youthmovenational.org, and it'll be sent right to us. We also have Twitters, we have the Facebooks, right? You can use all of those things to reach us. But one thing I wanted to mention is that at the top there is youthmovepeercenter.org. Now, I do recommend that you message Stephanie for any of your specific TA within Kentucky, but let's say there's something that Stephanie can't quite do, or information she doesn't quite have, you can feel free to go to youthmovepeercenter.org, and there you can find a bunch of resources for free technical assistance, trainings, things like that we can definitely get you connected with. In the chat box, I also did upload a couple of documents to help with youth advisory boards and stipending, so feel free to give a look to those. And I think with that, I'm about good to go.
And there is my email. So if you already don't have it, there it is. I want to give a shout out to Youth Move National. Thank you so much for helping with us today. I actually go to them a lot. I probably get on Jasmine and Joshua's nerves some days, but they love me, so I'm gonna just accept that. But do feel free to click around on their website as well, because they have tons of resources. Everything that we have that's relevant to today's presentation, again, will be shared via Vanessa. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it back to Vanessa. Thank you all so much.
Hey guys, thank you all so much for sharing this information with us. I love that we were able to have this conversation. I've taken pages of notes. So what I'll do is I will provide the highlights email that I send out later today that will include all the resources that we talked about. I've also copied a lot of the resources from the chat box that we'll send out as well to make sure that everybody gets it. And guys, I want to thank you all for joining with us today on this Friday morning to be part of this conversation. So thanks everybody for being on here. One thing that I do want to remind you of is the session evaluation link has been dropped in the chat box, and I'm going to drop that in there again. So please feel free to fill that out if you can. It's not very long. Also, let me know if you need a certificate of attendance. I'd be glad to get you one today. And before we get off here, I know we're a little bit over time. I just wanted to remind everyone of our next RIAC Learning Series session. It is scheduled for October the 7th, and the title is Using Data to Inform the RIAC Action Plan, the Focused Conversation Method. That's going to be with Dr. Vestina Robbins from the Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. And we hope to see you there. So if no one has any other questions or comments, just want to say have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.